They called him the ghost of Obsidian Fang. For 21 years, Kalimvaran existed in the shadows, invisible to the wolves who ruled the fortress and disposable to those who served it. He was a beta without a voice, a servant without a future. The packmates who passed him in the corridors looked through him like he was made of smoke. But they didn't know what slept beneath his silence. They didn't know that his bloodline carried a secret so dangerous it had been buried for 3 generations. When the visiting princess glanced at him across the crowded hall and whispered 5 careless words to her handmaiden, she didn't just bruise the Alpha King's pride. She lit a fuse that would burn down an empire. He's actually kind of hot. That single sentence unleashed a monster. Not the Alpha King's rage, though that came swift and brutal. No. It awakened something far older, far more terrifying, and sleeping inside the ghost himself. The beta is rising, and the king is about to kneel. The servants' quarters of Obsidian Fang Keep sat beneath the eastern tower, a maze of narrow corridors that never saw sunlight. The walls sweated with condensation. The air tasted of mildew and resignation. Kalimvaran woke before dawn, as he did every morning, to the sound of boots thundering overhead. The warriors were drilling. Somewhere above him, powerful wolves were honing their skills for glory and conquest. Down here, in the belly of the keep, Kalim's battlefield was a bucket of cold water and a scrub brush. He was tall for a beta, broad-shouldered in a way that seemed almost accidental, as if his body had forgotten its station. His hair was dark, the color of wet ink, perpetually falling into eyes that were an unusual shade of amber, almost gold in certain light. But no one looked closely enough to notice. Betas were furniture. Kalim was less than that. Varen! The bark echoed down the stone hallway. Kalim didn't flinch. He knew that voice too well. Torvik, the head of guard, a thick-necked gamma with a sadist smile and breath that could curdle milk. The Alpha King wants the Great Hall spotless before the delegation arrives. Every tile, every column. If I find one speck of dust, I'll have you whipped in the courtyard. Yes, sir? Kalim kept his eyes on the floor. Torvik stepped closer, his boot nudging Kalim's knee. Look at me when I speak to you, ghost. Kalim raised his gaze slowly. Something flickered in his amber eyes, a heat that made Torvik hesitate for a fraction of a second. Then it was gone, smothered, pushed down into whatever dark place Kalim kept his pride locked away. Better. Torvik sneered and marched off, his laughter trailing behind him like a bad smell. Kalim exhaled slowly and gathered his supplies. The great hall of Obsidian Fang was a cathedral of black stone and iron. Chandeliers forged from wolf skulls hung from the vaulted ceiling, their eye sockets filled with ever-burning flames. Banners displaying the pack's crest, a snarling wolf over a crescent moon, lined the walls. It was a room designed to intimidate, and it succeeded. Kalim worked in silence, scrubbing the obsidian tiles until they reflected the torchlight like dark mirrors. His knees ached. His hands were raw, but he had learned long ago that pain was just noise, and noise could be ignored. Well, well, the ghost is haunting the hall today. Kalim's jaw tightened. Vespera Night Hollow, the Alpha King's cousin and self-appointed tormentor of anyone she deemed beneath her, which was everyone. She glided toward him, flanked by 2 Omega girls who giggled on cue. Vespera was beautiful in the way a viper was beautiful, sleek, cold, and venomous. Her silver hair was braided with black pearls, and her dress probably cost more than Kalim would earn in a decade. Missed a spot. She pointed a manicured finger at a tile that was perfectly clean. I'll address it immediately, my lady. You'll address it on your hands and knees, where you belong. She placed her heel on his shoulder blade and shoved. Kalim caught himself before his face hit the stone, palms slapping the wet floor. The Omega girls tittered. My cousin is entertaining Princess Seraphine of the Valcrest Dominion tonight. Vespera continued, circling him like a predator. Rumor has it he intends to announce their betrothal. Imagine that ghost. A union that will create the most powerful alliance in centuries. And you'll be here, scrubbing the floor they dance on. She crouched down, her face inches from his. Do you ever wonder what it feels like to matter, Calum? To have someone look at you with something other than disgust? He didn't answer. He had stopped answering years ago. Vespera laughed and stood, adjusting her dress. Finish quickly. If you're still here when the guests arrive, Draven will have your tongue cut out. He doesn't like eyesores. She swept away, her entourage following like obedient shadows. Calum stayed on his hands and knees, breathing through the humiliation. Somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the layers of suppression and survival, something stirred. A growl. Ancient. Furious. Not yet, he told it. Not yet. He pushed the voice down and resumed scrubbing. But tonight was the Blood Moon Gala. Tonight, the Valcrest princess would arrive. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. The Blood Moon Gala transformed Obsidian Fang Keep into a fever dream of crimson and gold. Thousands of candles flickered in iron sconces. Rose petals carpeted the entrance hall, their fragrance mingling with the musk of powerful wolves arriving from every territory in the realm. Silk gowns whispered against marble. Laughter, sharp and performative, echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Calum was not supposed to be here. He had finished his duties and was meant to disappear back into the servants' quarters, invisible as always. But something had pulled him to the shadowed alcove behind the musicians' gallery. A compulsion he couldn't name. A whisper in his blood that said, "Watch." So he watched. Alpha King Draven Thorn sat upon the obsidian throne, elevated above the glittering crowd. He was devastatingly handsome in the way that storms were beautiful, dark-haired, ice-blue eyes, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Every unmated female in the room kept stealing glances at him. Every male kept their eyes carefully averted. Draven was not just an alpha, he was the Alpha King, ruler of the 5 United Territories, a title won through bloodshed and maintained through fear. At 26, he had already crushed 2 rebellions and executed a council elder who dared question his judgment. He smiled rarely, laughed never, and looked at his subjects the way a wolf looks at sheep. Tonight, though, there was a gleam of anticipation in those cold eyes. The herald's staff struck the floor 3 times. Presenting Her Royal Highness, Princess Seraphine Aldrich of the Valcrest Dominion, Jewel of the Northern Realm, and Daughter of the White Fang. The crowd parted like water. Calum's breath caught. She was nothing like the cold beauties of Draven's court. Where they were sharp edges and calculated smiles, Seraphine Aldrich was warmth and light. Her hair was a cascade of chestnut waves, crowned with a delicate circlet of moonstones. Her gown was ivory silk that moved like liquid as she walked. But it was her eyes that held him, green as spring leaves, bright with intelligence and something else. Mischief, perhaps, or defiance. She was the most beautiful woman Calum had ever seen, and she was promised to the monster on the throne. Seraphine approached the dais and curtsied with perfect grace. Alpha King Draven, thank you for your hospitality. Princess. Draven rose, descending the steps to take her hand. He pressed his lips to her knuckles, lingering a moment too long. Obsidian Fang is honored by your radiance. Tonight, we celebrate the union of our great houses. The crowd applauded. Seraphine's smile didn't reach her eyes. The festivities began. Music swelled. Couples took to the dance floor. Draven kept Seraphine at his side. one possessive hand on the small of her back, parading her like a trophy. Caleb should have left. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat to the shadows where he belonged, but his feet wouldn't move. It happened during the third waltz. Seraphine excused herself to speak with her handmaiden, Ilara, a mousy girl with nervous hands who had accompanied her from Valcrest. They stood near a pillar draped in crimson silk, close enough to the alcove that Caleb could hear their whispered conversation. "The Alpha King is quite attentive," Ilara murmured. "The Alpha King is quite possessive," Seraphine corrected, her tone dry. "He's looked at me all evening like I'm a brooch he's deciding whether to buy." "Shh! Someone might hear." Seraphine's gaze drifted across the room, restless, searching. It passed over the dancing, nobles, the glittering chandeliers, the servants refilling wine goblets, and then it landed on the alcove, on Caleb. Their eyes met. A jolt of electricity shot through Caleb's chest, so sudden and violent that he nearly gasped. Seraphine's lips parted slightly, her brow furrowed as if she was trying to place him, trying to understand why a servant in the shadows had just made her heart skip. Caleb dropped his gaze immediately. "Stupid. Foolish. She's a princess. You're nothing." But Seraphine was still looking at him, her head tilted, the corner of her mouth curved into something almost like a smile. She leaned toward Ilara, her voice barely a whisper, but in a room full of wolves with supernatural hearing, barely was not enough. "That one, by the pillar. He's actually kind of hot." 5 words, casual, almost playful. 5 words that detonated like a bomb. Across the hall, Alpha King Draven Thorn went rigid. His ice-blue eyes snapped toward the alcove, following the trajectory of Seraphine's gaze. They found Caleb in the shadows. Recognition flickered, then disbelief, then something far more dangerous. Rage. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Conversations faltered. Dancers stumbled. Every wolf in the hall felt the sudden spike in their king's aura, a pressure wave of dominance and fury that made the weaker ones whimper. Seraphine realized her mistake instantly. The color drained from her face. Draven's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Guards." 2 armored warriors materialized at his side. "Bring me the beta hiding in the alcove." Draven's smile was terrifying, a predator baring its teeth. "It seems we have a rat who's forgotten his place." Caleb's blood turned to ice. He tried to run, but the guards were faster. They seized him by the arms and dragged him into the light, throwing him onto the dance floor at the Alpha King's feet. The music died. Every eye in the hall fixed on the servant sprawled on the rose petals, and on the king standing over him with murder in his gaze. "Well, well," Draven murmured, circling Caleb slowly. "The ghost of Obsidian Fang. I'd forgotten you existed." He crouched down, gripping Caleb's jaw and forcing his head up. "Tell me, Beta, what is it about you that caught my future queen's eye?" Caleb said nothing. His amber eyes met Draven's blue ones, and for a single heartbeat, something ancient and defiant flickered in their depths. Draven saw it, and his expression shifted from cruel amusement to cold, calculated hatred. "I think," the Alpha King said softly, "we need to remind everyone here what happens when a rat reaches above its station." He rose to his full height, addressing the crowd with a showman's flourish. "Let the entertainment begin." The guards stripped Caleb of his servant's tunic and forced him to his knees in the center of the dance floor. Rose petals stuck to his bare skin. The cold marble bit into his kneecaps. 500 wolves stared down at him with expressions ranging from pity to amusement to hungry anticipation. This was entertainment for them. A break from the monotony of politics and dancing. Alpha King Draven circled him slowly, savoring the moment. 21 years. Draven announced to the crowd. 21 years this creature has lived in my keep, eating my food, breathing my air. And how does he repay my generosity? He paused for effect. By daring to catch the eye of my betrothed. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Seraphine stood frozen near the pillar, her face ashen. Ilara clutched her arm, both of them helpless witnesses. I didn't... Caleb started. Draven's boot connected with his ribs. The crack echoed through the silent hall. Caleb doubled over, gasping, tasting copper on his tongue. Rats don't speak unless spoken to. Draven crouched down, grabbing a fistful of Caleb's dark hair and wrenching his head back. You know what I find fascinating, Ghost? You have no wolf. You've never shifted. You're not even a real beta. You're just a human with a drop of cursed blood. A genetic accident that should have been drowned at birth. He released Caleb's hair with a shove. Torvik. The whip. The head of guard stepped forward, a coiled leather whip in his meaty hands. His sadist's smile had returned, wider than ever. 21 lashes, Draven declared. One for each year he's wasted space in my territory. Let this be a lesson to all who forget their station. The first lash split the air like a thunderclap. Caleb's back erupted in fire. He bit down on his tongue to keep from screaming, blood filling his mouth. He would not give them the satisfaction. The second lash. The third. By the fifth, his vision was swimming. By the 10th, the world had narrowed to a single point of agony. But somewhere beneath the pain, something else was stirring. They dare, the voice growled louder now. They dare touch what is mine. Caleb's hands curled into fists against the marble. Not yet, he begged the voice. Please, not yet. No, the voice answered, ancient and terrible. Now. The 15th lash never landed. Torvik's arm froze mid-swing. A pulse of energy exploded outward from Caleb's body, a shockwave of golden light that sent the head of guard flying backward into a marble column. Caleb's scream transformed into something else entirely, a roar. The golden light was blinding. Guests stumbled backward, shielding their eyes, wine glasses shattered. The iron chandeliers swung wildly, their skull flames flickering as if terrified. Caleb's body convulsed on the marble floor. His spine arched at an impossible angle. The wounds on his back weren't bleeding anymore. They were glowing, seams of molten gold spreading across his skin, like cracks in the earth revealing magma beneath. What is this? Draven snarled, backing away despite himself. What's happening to him? No one answered. No one could. Caleb's bones began to break and reform. The sound was horrific, wet snaps and grinding cartilage that made even hardened warriors flinch. His muscles rippled and expanded. Dark fur erupted from his skin, but it wasn't the gray or brown of a common wolf. It was black as midnight, shot through with veins of burnished gold. He grew and grew and kept growing. The smell of ozone and cedar filled the hall, sharp and electric, as if lightning had struck the very floor where he knelt. Heat radiated from his transforming body in waves, causing the nearest rose petals to curl and blacken. Where a beaten servant had knelt moments before, a wolf now stood. He was massive, easily 8 feet at the shoulder, dwarfing every alpha in the room. His fur seemed to absorb the light around him, while simultaneously radiating its own inner luminescence. His eyes, when they opened, were no longer amber. They were pure, blazing gold. Twin suns burning in a face of shadow. The pressure that emanated from him was suffocating. Omegas collapsed instantly, unconscious before they hit the floor. Betas and gammas fell to their knees, whimpering, unable to resist the primal command in their blood. Even the alphas staggered, their wolves howling in submission inside their minds. Draven Thorn, the Alpha King who had never bowed to anyone, felt his knees buckle. He caught himself on the arm of his throne, teeth gritted, veins bulging in his neck as he fought the compulsion. Impossible, he gasped. The Aurelians are extinct. They were wiped out 300 years ago. The great black and gold wolf turned its burning gaze upon the king. You whipped me. The voice echoed not through the air but directly into every mind present. You called me rat. You called me ghost. You called me nothing. The wolf took a step forward. The marble cracked beneath his paw. I am Calem Varen, last son of the Aurelian bloodline. And you, little king, are sitting on my ancestor's throne. Draven's face contorted with fury and fear. Guards! Kill it! Kill it now! The elite warriors charged, shifting mid-stride into their wolf forms. A dozen alphas, the finest fighters in the realm, converging on the golden-eyed beast. Calem didn't move. He simply opened his jaws and released a roar that shook the foundations of Obsidian Fang Keep. The sound wave hit the charging wolves like a physical force, lifting them off their feet and hurling them through the stained glass windows. Glass exploded outward into the night. Cold wind rushed in, carrying snowflakes that sizzled and evaporated when they touched Calem's glowing fur. Silence fell, broken only by the groans of the fallen and the howling wind. Seraphine stood alone amidst the chaos, the only one besides Draven still on her feet. She wasn't cowering. She was staring at Calem with an expression of wonder, her green eyes reflecting his golden light. Beautiful, she whispered. Calem's massive head turned toward her. The rage in his golden eyes flickered, softened by something else when they met her gaze. Then the exhaustion hit. The first shift, especially one this powerful, drained everything. Calem's legs trembled, his vision blurred. The golden light began to fade, his form shrinking, bones reshaping with agonizing slowness. He collapsed onto the shattered marble, human again, naked and broken and barely conscious. But before the darkness claimed him, he heard Draven's voice, cold with recovered composure. Chain him in silver, wake the executioner. At dawn, the last Aurelian dies. Calem woke to the smell of damp stone and burning sage. He was not in the dungeon. That was the first surprise. The second was that he was lying on a bed of furs softer than anything he had ever touched, in a room carved from living rock, illuminated by floating orbs of pale blue light. He shot upright, immediately regretting it as pain lanced through every muscle in his body. His back, where the whip had torn him open, was bandaged with some kind of herbal poultice that smelled of pine and something floral. Easy, young one. The voice was deep, calm, ancient. Your body has been through a war. Give it time to remember how to be whole. Calem's head snapped toward the corner of the room. A man sat there in a high-backed chair shrouded in shadow. He was old, impossibly old, with a face like weathered oak and a long silver beard that reached his chest. But his eyes, when they caught the light, were gold, the same gold as Calem's. Who are you? Calem demanded, his voice hoarse. Where am I? How did I? One question at a time. The old man rose, moving with a grace that belied his apparent age. He wore simple robes of gray wool, but there was nothing simple about the power that radiated from him. My name is Mordecai Varen. I am your great-grandfather. And you are in the sanctuary of the forgotten, a place that does not exist on any map and cannot be found by those who wish us harm. Calem's mind reeled. That's not possible. I was told my family were low-ranking servants, that my parents died in a border skirmish. Lies, Mordecai said, settling onto the edge of the bed. Necessary lies, told to protect you. Your father was my grandson, Aldrich Varen, true heir to the Aurelian throne. Your mother was Lysara of the Embervale, a princess in her own right. They were murdered by Draven's father when you were 3 months old. I spirited you away and placed you in Obsidian Fang, hidden in plain sight. Your wolf sealed so deeply that even the most powerful trackers couldn't sense your bloodline. Sealed? Calum touched his chest, remembering the voice, the power, the explosion of golden light. A binding ritual, old magic, designed to keep your wolf dormant until you were ready, or until extreme trauma shattered the seal prematurely. Mordecai's expression darkened. Those fools. If they had simply ignored you, you might have lived your entire life as a ghost. But they couldn't resist breaking what they saw as weak. Their cruelty was their undoing. Calum struggled to process the enormity of what he was hearing. The Aurelians ruled before the Thorns? The Aurelians ruled for 2,000 years, Mordecai corrected. We were the chosen of the sun god, counterbalance to the moon goddess's children. Our wolves carried the light of dawn in their veins. We didn't just lead the packs, we protected them, united them, and loved them. But the Thorns wanted power without responsibility. They allied with a dark faction and slaughtered our line in a single bloody night. They called it the purging. We call it the betrayal. He placed a weathered hand on Calum's shoulder. You are the last of us, Calum. The last Aurelian. The last golden wolf. And now that you have awakened, nothing will ever be the same. Calum stared at his hands. Normal human hands. But he could feel it now. The power coiled inside him, waiting. Draven will hunt me. He'll never stop. Let him come, Mordecai said, a fierce smile crossing his ancient face. I have waited 300 years for this moment, for you. He stood, walking toward the chamber door. Rest now. Tomorrow, your training begins. Training for what? Mordecai paused at the threshold, looking back with eyes that burned like twin sunrises. To reclaim your throne, to unite the fractured kingdoms, and to make every wolf who ever called you ghost kneel at your feet. He left, the door closing silently behind him. Calum lay back on the furs, his mind spinning. Somewhere in his chest, the golden wolf stirred, content for now, but hungry. Patience, Calum told it. We have waited 21 years. We can wait a little longer. The wolf's response was a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through his bones. Not too long. The girl with green eyes. We will have her. And the false king's head. Outside the sanctuary, hidden in the mountains beyond Draven's reach, a storm was gathering. Lightning flickered on the horizon. And in Obsidian Fang Keep, Princess Seraphine Aldrich sat alone in her guest chambers, refusing to sleep. Unable to forget the golden eyes of a ghost who had turned out to be a god. 3 weeks passed in the Sanctuary of the Forgotten. The hidden fortress was carved into the heart of Mount Valdris, a peak so treacherous that even the most ambitious explorers had abandoned attempts to scale it centuries ago. Inside, however, it was warm, lit by those strange floating orbs and heated by geothermal vents that whispered with ancient magic. Calum trained every waking hour. Mordecai was a brutal teacher. He pushed Calum past the point of exhaustion, forced him to shift and hold his wolf form for hours, and made him run through obstacle courses that would have killed ordinary wolves. But Calum wasn't ordinary. With each passing day, he felt the power inside him growing, stabilizing, and becoming something he could wield rather than something that wielded him. Again, Mordecai commanded, standing at the edge of the training pit. Calum lunged at the enchanted training dummy, his claws extended. He moved, faster than he had yesterday, faster than he had thought possible. The dummy exploded into splinters. Better. Mordecai nodded, the closest thing to praise he ever offered. Now come, there is something you must see. He led Caleb through winding corridors to a chamber Caleb had never entered. The walls were covered in ancient murals depicting wolves of gold battling creatures of shadow. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it rested an ancient tome bound in leather that seemed to shimmer. "The Codex of Dawn," Mordecai said reverently, "the sacred text of our bloodline, hidden here since the betrayal." He opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. The text was in an old language, but as Caleb looked at it, the words seemed to rearrange themselves, becoming legible. "When the last sun rises from the ashes of humiliation," Caleb read aloud, "when the golden wolf walks among the shadows, the fractured realms shall tremble. He shall face the usurper in the circle of ancestors, and the sun shall judge the worthy. One shall rule, one shall fall, and the mate who spoke his worth into existence shall crown him or bury him." Caleb looked up, his heart hammering. The mate who spoke his worth into existence. "The princess," Mordecai confirmed. Her words at the gala weren't just a casual observation, they were a prophecy trigger. The old magic recognized her voice, her intent, and used it to shatter the seal I had placed on you. "Seraphine is my mate?" "The bond hasn't fully formed yet, but yes. Your wolves recognized each other across that crowded hall. Why do you think Draven reacted with such fury? On some primal level, his wolf knew. He sensed the connection between you, and it drove him mad." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "She's still there, in Obsidian Fang. With him. For now." Mordecai's golden eyes gleamed. But not for long. Before Caleb could respond, a young wolf burst into the chamber, breathless. "Elder Mordecai, a visitor at the eastern gate. She came alone through the Widow's Pass. She shifted and ran in wolf form for 3 days straight to reach us. She's asking for the golden wolf." Caleb's blood turned electric. He knew, even before the words left the messenger's mouth. "She says her name is Seraphine Aldrich. And she says she's defecting." They brought her to the great hall of the sanctuary. Seraphine looked nothing like the pristine princess from the gala. Her borrowed clothes were torn and muddied. Her chestnut hair was tangled with leaves and frost. There were scratches on her arms and dark circles under her eyes. The 3-day run in wolf form had pushed her to her absolute limits. But when her green eyes found Caleb across the hall, they blazed with fierce determination. "You came," Caleb said, stepping toward her. "I ran." She laughed, a raw, exhausted sound. "The moment Draven realized I had witnessed your transformation without collapsing like the others, he locked me in my chambers. He accused me of being complicit in some plot. He said he would break our betrothal only after he had executed you, and I had watched." Her voice hardened. "I broke a guard's nose with a candlestick and climbed out a window." Despite everything, Caleb smiled. Resourceful. Desperate. She closed the distance between them, stopping just inches away. "I don't know what's happening between us. I don't understand why I feel like I've known you for 1,000 years when we've never even spoken. But I know that when I saw you on that floor, bleeding, I wanted to tear Draven's throat out with my bare hands." Caleb reached up, brushing a leaf from her hair. The touch sent sparks cascading down his spine. "Draven won't let this stand," he said quietly. "He'll come for both of us now." "Let him come." Seraphine's chin lifted. "I'm done being a pawn in someone else's game." Behind them, Mordecai cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt this touching reunion, but we have a problem. Our scouts report that Draven has mobilized his entire army. He's marching on the Valdris Range. He's invoking the right of sovereign challenge." Caleb turned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Mordecai said grimly, "he's demanding single combat with you in the circle of ancestors. Winner takes all. The throne, the kingdoms, and the princess." If you refuse, he'll lay siege to the sanctuary. Our defenses are strong, but against 5,000 wolves, we would eventually fall. Then I accept, Calum said without hesitation. Seraphine grabbed his arm. Calum, you've only been training for 3 weeks. Draven has been fighting his entire life. Calum looked down at her, and his golden eyes blazed. So have I. I just didn't know it yet. The Circle of Ancestors was neutral ground, a massive stone amphitheater carved into a valley between territories. It had been built 2,000 years ago by the first Aurelian king as a place where disputes could be settled honorably. The irony of facing the usurper of his throne here was not lost on Calum. 10,000 wolves had gathered on the tiered stone seats. They came from every territory, summoned by the unprecedented nature of this challenge. An alpha king facing a wolf who had been a servant mere weeks ago. A bloodline thought extinct, risen from the ashes. The air crackled with tension and anticipation. Calum stood at the northern entrance wearing simple black combat leathers that Mordecai had provided. His dark hair was tied back. His amber eyes, flecked with gold, scanned the crowd with calm focus. Seraphine stood beside him, her hand clasping his. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Always." He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in, jasmine and snow and something indefinably her. Then he released her and walked into the arena. The southern entrance opened. Alpha King Draven Thorn strode out, flanked by his remaining elite guards. He wore ceremonial armor of black steel etched with silver runes. His dark hair was slicked back, his ice-blue eyes burning with cold fury. Behind him walked Vespera Nighthollow, her silver hair braided for war, and Torvik, the head of guard, his arm still in a sling from where Kylem's shockwave had broken it. The crowd fell silent as both combatants reached the center of the circle. Draven's lip curled. "Look at you, the ghost, playing at being a king. 3 weeks of training with a senile relic, and you think you can challenge me?" "I think," Calum said calmly, "that you've spent your entire life taking what doesn't belong to you, my throne, my people, my mate." Draven's eye twitched at the last word. "She was never yours?" "Her wolf disagrees, as does mine." Draven lunged without warning, shifting mid-leap into his massive black wolf. It was a dirty move, attacking before the official start, designed to catch Calum off guard. It didn't work. Calum shifted in a blaze of golden light, meeting Draven's charge head-on. The collision of their bodies shook the amphitheater. Stone cracked beneath their paws. They separated, circling. Draven was fast, experienced, brutal. He had killed dozens of challengers in this very circle. His wolf was pure alpha, bred for dominance and destruction. But Calum's wolf was something else entirely. Draven lunged again, jaws snapping for Calum's throat. Calum twisted, raking his golden-veined claws across Draven's flank. Blood sprayed across the white stone. The crowd gasped, first blood to the Aurelian. Draven snarled, redoubling his assault. He was stronger than Calum had anticipated, his attacks relentless. A claw caught Calum's shoulder, tearing through fur and muscle. Another slash opened a wound on his hindquarters. Calum stumbled, pain flaring through his body. "Focus," his wolf growled inside him. "He fights with rage. We fight with purpose. Feel the rhythm." Calum closed his golden eyes for a heartbeat, centering himself. When he opened them, everything had changed. He could see the pattern of Draven's attacks now, the telegraph in his shoulders before each lunge, the slight drop of his head before each snap. It was like watching a dance whose steps he suddenly understood. Draven lunged. Calum sidestepped, pivoted, and sank his teeth into the back of Draven's neck. The Alpha King howled, thrashing wildly, but Calum held firm. He bit down harder, feeling vertebrae grind beneath his jaws. One more pound of pressure and he would sever the spine. Do it, his wolf urged. End the usurper. But Calum hesitated. Killing Draven would make him a conqueror, not a king. It would validate everything the Thorns had done 300 years ago, taking power through blood rather than earning it through worthiness. He released Draven's neck and stepped back. Yield, Calum commanded, his voice echoing through the minds of everyone present. Draven shifted back to human form, clutching his bleeding neck. His face was twisted with agony and humiliation. Never, he spat. I am the Alpha King. I kneel to no one. You kneel to the circle, Mordecai's voice boomed from the stands. By the ancient laws, the challenged combatant who cannot continue must yield or die. Make your choice, Draven Thorn. Draven looked around the amphitheater. He saw 10,000 faces staring at him, saw the fear and disgust in the eyes of wolves who had once trembled at his name. He saw Seraphine, standing at the northern entrance, her hand pressed to her heart. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Calum with an expression of such profound love and relief that it shattered whatever remained of Draven's pride. I yield, Draven rasped, the words tearing from his throat like broken glass. The crowd erupted. Calum shifted back to human form, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen wounds, but victorious. He turned toward Seraphine, ready to go to her. That's when the arrow struck him in the chest. Calum staggered backward, staring at the black-fletched shaft protruding from just below his collarbone. The crowd's cheers turned to screams. No! Seraphine's voice cut through the chaos. She vaulted over the barrier, sprinting toward him. Calum dropped to one knee, his vision swimming. The arrowhead burned inside him, not ordinary iron, but something else. Something that felt like acid in his veins. Silver-infused wolfsbane, Mordecai snarled, appearing at his side. Old magic, designed specifically to kill Aurelians. He looked up, scanning the crowd. There, the archer. A figure in a gray cloak was fleeing through the upper stands, shoving spectators aside. But before anyone could give chase, more cloaked figures emerged from the exits, blocking the paths. The Hollow Circle, Mordecai hissed. An assassination cult. They're the ones who helped the Thorns during the betrayal. Draven, still on the ground clutching his wounded neck, started to laugh. It was a wet, desperate sound. You didn't think I came alone, did you? He grinned, blood staining his teeth. I may have lost the challenge, but you won't live to claim the throne, Aurelian. The Hollow Circle has waited 3 centuries to finish what they started. Vespera stepped forward, and Calum realized with cold horror that she wore a gray cloak clasp, the symbol of the cult. My family has served the Circle for generations, Vespera announced, her voice ringing across the amphitheater. We preserved the old poisons, the old weapons, and tonight we end the golden bloodline forever. More cultists poured into the arena, surrounding Calum, Seraphine, and Mordecai. There had to be 50 of them, all armed with silver weapons that glinted with that same sickly purple sheen, wolfsbane coating. Seraphine grabbed Calum, pressing her hand against the wound around the arrow. Stay with me. Don't you dare die. Wasn't planning on it, Calum gasped. But the poison was spreading. He could feel it shutting down his wolf, silencing the golden power inside him. There's only one way to burn out the poison, Mordecai said urgently, but it's dangerous. It could kill you or transform you into something beyond a wolf. Do it, Calum gritted out. Mordecai hesitated. Do it! The old wolf placed both hands on Calum's chest, flanking the arrow. He closed his golden eyes and began to chant in the ancient Aurelian tongue. The words were harsh, guttural, and they made the air itself vibrate. Calum screamed. Light erupted from within him, not golden this time, but white, pure, blinding white, the color of the sun at its zenith. The arrow disintegrated. The poison in his veins ignited, burning away in a cascade of agony that felt like being reborn through fire. The cultists attacked. Seraphine shifted into her wolf form, a sleek silver creature, smaller than an alpha but fierce beyond measure. She tore into the nearest cultist, protecting Calum's prone form. Mordecai stood and unleashed a wave of golden energy that sent 5 attackers flying. But there were too many. A cultist blade sliced across Seraphine's flank. She yelped, stumbling. Another cultist raised a spear, ready to drive it through her heart. Enough! The voice didn't come from Calum's throat. It came from everywhere, from the stone itself, from the sky, from the core of the earth. Calum rose, but he wasn't just a wolf anymore. His body had transformed into something beyond flesh and fur. He stood upright, a towering figure of living light and shadow, humanoid, but covered in patterns of golden flame that traced his skin like divine tattoos. His eyes were twin suns, wings of pure radiance stretched from his back, spanning 20 feet. The ancient texts called it the ascended form, the true manifestation of an Aurelian at the peak of their power, half wolf, half god. It hadn't been achieved in over 1,000 years. The cultists froze, paralyzed not by dominance, but by sheer existential terror. They were staring at something that shouldn't exist, a myth made manifest. Calum raised one hand. "You hunted my bloodline," his voice echoed with layered harmonics. "You murdered my parents. You poisoned my childhood. You tried to take my mate." He clenched his fist. Every cultist in the arena dropped their weapons simultaneously. Their hands moved against their will, reaching for their own throats. "I could kill you all with a thought," Calum continued. "I could burn you from the inside out, turn your bones to ash and your souls to cinders." He opened his fist. The cultists collapsed, gasping, freed from his grip. "But I am not you. I am not a thorn. I do not rule through slaughter." He looked at Draven, who was staring at him with abject horror. "I rule through justice." Calum descended, his form slowly dimming, the wings folding away, the divine fire receding until he was simply a man again, exhausted, bloody, but unbroken. He walked to where Seraphine lay in human form, clutching her wounded side. He knelt and gathered her into his arms. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you." She laughed weakly, reaching up to touch his face. "You're glowing." "Only for you." Mordecai approached, his ancient face streaked with tears. "It is done. The challenge is won. The cult is broken. Calum Varin, by the laws of the Circle of Ancestors and by the divine right of the Aurelian bloodline." He dropped to one knee. Around the amphitheater, 10,000 wolves followed. Even Draven, his face a mask of bitter defeat, slowly lowered himself to the ground. "I declare you the true Alpha King." The words rang across the valley, carried by the wind to every corner of the realm, and somewhere in his chest, Calum's golden wolf howled in triumph. The coronation was set for the following week at the restored palace of Solhaven, ancestral home of the Aurelian kings. The ancient fortress had been abandoned for 3 centuries, but Mordecai had kept a small group of loyalists maintaining its bones. Now, wolves from every territory poured in to help restore it, eager to curry favor with the new regime. Calum stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. His wounds had healed, accelerated by his Aurelian blood, but the exhaustion ran deeper than flesh. Soft footsteps approached from behind. "You should be resting," Seraphine said, slipping her arms around his waist and pressing her cheek to his back. "So should you." He turned, pulling her close. The gash on her side was bandaged, but she moved without pain. "How are you feeling?" "Like I survived a nightmare and woke up in a dream." She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Is this real, Calum? A month ago, I was being shipped off to marry a monster. Now you're what?" She bit her lip. "I don't know what I am to you. The prophecy said I would crown you or bury you. That's done. The challenge is won. Maybe you don't need me anymore." Calum cupped her face in his hands. "Seraphine Aldrich, I spent 21 years as a ghost. Invisible. Worthless. And then you looked across a crowded room and saw me." His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "You didn't just break my seal. You broke something far more important. You broke the lie I had believed my entire life, that I was nothing." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't need you because of a prophecy. I need you because you are the first person who ever made me feel real. I need you because when I'm with you, the golden wolf doesn't just feel powerful, it feels peaceful." Seraphine's breath caught. "Calum, be my queen," he said. "Not because fate demands it. Because I'm asking. Because I love you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. I think I loved you the moment I saw you in that alcove, even though I didn't understand it." She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like salt water and promises. They didn't hear the door open behind them. "Apologies for the interruption." Mordecai's voice was tight with urgency. "But we have a situation." Calum turned, keeping one arm around Seraphine. "What's wrong?" "Draven has escaped custody. He killed 3 guards and fled into the Thornwood Forest." Mordecai's golden eyes were grave. "But that's not the worst of it. He took something from the vault. An artifact we thought was lost." "What artifact?" "The Eclipse Stone." Mordecai's voice dropped. "It's a relic from the war between the Sun God and the Moon Goddess. In the wrong hands, it can tear open the veil between worlds and summon creatures of pure darkness. If Draven activates it, he'll unleash something worse than any wolf army." Calum finished. Seraphine's hand tightened on his arm. "Can he even use it?" "He's not Aurelian. The stone doesn't require Aurelian blood to activate. It requires sacrifice." Mordecai's face was ashen. "And Draven took Vespera with him." Calum's blood ran cold. Vespera was many things: cruel, ambitious, a traitor. But she was also Draven's cousin. His blood. "She doesn't know," Mordecai added grimly. "He told her they were regrouping to plan a counterattack. By the time she realizes the truth, it will be too late. He's going to kill her to power the stone." "We have until midnight," Mordecai confirmed. "That's when the eclipse reaches its peak. If he completes the ritual, the darkness he summons will consume everything. Soul Haven, the territories, the entire realm." Calum looked at Seraphine. He saw the fear in her eyes, but beneath it, something stronger. Resolve. "Then we stop him," Calum said. "Together," Seraphine added. They ran. The Thornwood Forest was a place of ancient evil. The trees grew so thick that no sunlight penetrated their canopy. The air smelled of rot and old blood. Creatures that were neither wolf nor beast lurked in the shadows, driven mad by centuries of dark energy seeping up from below. At the heart of the forest stood the black altar, a ring of obsidian stones older than memory. Calum, Seraphine, and a small strike team of Aurelian loyalists arrived as the moon began to swallow the sun. The eclipse cast the world in sickly twilight. Draven stood at the center of the altar, the eclipse stone raised above his head. It pulsed with purple-black energy that made Calum's skin crawl. At his feet lay Vespera, bound and gagged, her silver hair matted with blood. Her eyes were wide with terror and betrayal. She had finally understood. "You're too late," Draven called out, his voice manic with triumph. "In 5 minutes, the veil tears open. And then, Aurelian, all your light won't save you from the darkness." "Let her go, Draven." Caleb stepped forward, his golden eyes blazing. "This is between you and me. It was never just between us." Draven laughed. "It's between what you represent and what I represent. Order versus chaos. Light versus shadow. You think you can bring peace? You think these wolves will follow a king who shows mercy?" He kicked Vespera's prone form. "They respect strength. They respect fear. And when I unleash the Shadowborn, they will remember why the Thorns ruled for 300 years." He raised a sacrificial dagger. Caleb moved. He shifted mid-stride, his golden wolf exploding outward. But Draven was ready. He slashed his own palm and pressed the bloody hand to the eclipse stone. The world screamed. A crack split the sky above the altar, a wound in reality itself. Through it poured darkness, not the absence of light, but a living, hungry thing. Shapes emerged from the tear, creatures of nightmare with too many limbs and mouths full of void. Shadowborn. "Seraphine, get the Loyalists back!" Caleb roared through the mental link. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before obeying, shifting and herding the strike team away from the altar. Caleb faced the horde alone. The first Shadowborn lunged at him. He tore it apart with claws of golden fire. Another took its place, then another, then 5 more at once. They kept coming, an endless tide of horror pouring through the rift, their shrieks filling the air like breaking glass. Draven watched from the altar, laughing, the eclipse stone clutched to his chest. "You can't win! For everyone you kill, 10 more emerge. The veil will stay open until the eclipse ends, and by then, there won't be a realm left to rule." Caleb was tiring. Even his Aurelian power had limits. The Shadowborn were endless, their claws tearing at his flanks, their void mouths snapping at his throat. "There is one way," his wolf said inside him. "The ascended form. Channel everything through the stone. Use Draven's own weapon against him. It could kill me. It will kill him. And it will close the rift." Caleb didn't hesitate. He gathered every shred of power inside him, every drop of golden fire, every spark of divine inheritance. He felt the ascended form trying to manifest, but this time he didn't let it take shape. He compressed it. All that light, all that energy, condensed into a single point in his chest, and then he released it. Not outward, inward. He launched himself at Draven, crashing through the Shadowborn like a meteor through clouds. He collided with the former Alpha King, one hand closing around the eclipse stone, the other around Draven's throat. "This ends now," Caleb said. He channeled the compressed Aurelian power directly into the stone. The artifact shrieked, a sound beyond hearing, as golden light flooded its corrupted core. The purple-black energy fought back, but it was no match for the concentrated essence of the sun god's chosen bloodline. The rift in the sky began to close. The Shadowborn dissolved, screaming, unable to exist in the presence of such radiant force. Draven screamed too, the backlash of his own weapon tearing through him. His body convulsed, his ice-blue eyes bulging, and then he was gone. Not dead in the traditional sense. Unmade. Erased by the collision of light and darkness, leaving nothing behind but ash and echo. The eclipse stone shattered in Caleb's hand. The rift sealed with a thunderclap. And Caleb collapsed onto the black altar, the last of his strength spent, his vision fading to gold and then to nothing. 1 month later, the great hall of Soul Haven Palace blazed with light. Thousands of candles illuminated the restored splendor of the Aurelian throne room. Banners of gold and black hung from the rafters. Wolves from every territory stood in respectful rows, their finest clothes a sea of color and silk. At the far end of the hall, upon a dais of white marble, stood two thrones. Calem Varen sat upon the larger one, dressed in ceremonial armor of gold and obsidian. The crown of the Aurelian kings rested upon his dark hair, a circlet of woven sunlight that had been hidden in the sanctuary for 3 centuries. He had survived the ritual at the black altar, though it had taken 2 weeks for him to wake from the coma. Seraphine hadn't left his side for a single moment. Now she sat beside him on the second throne, wearing a gown of ivory silk embroidered with golden wolves. A matching crown graced her chestnut hair. She was no longer Princess Seraphine Aldrich of Valcrest. She was Queen Seraphine Varen, his mate, his equal. Mordecai stood before the assembled crowd, his voice carrying across the hall. 300 years ago, the Aurelian line was betrayed. Our kings were murdered. Our people were scattered. The usurpers told us that the golden wolves were gone forever. He paused, letting the weight of history settle. They were wrong. He turned and bowed to Calem. Today, we witness not just a coronation, but a restoration. The sun has risen again. The realm has a true king. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the chandeliers. Calem rose, raising his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried to every corner of the hall. I was a ghost, a servant, a thing to be beaten and forgotten. Many of you in this room looked through me as if I didn't exist. He let that truth hang in the air. I don't say this to shame you. I say it because I want you to understand something important. He looked out at the sea of faces. Every wolf matters. Every voice counts. The strength of a pack is not measured by the power of its alpha, but by how it treats its weakest members. That is the kingdom I will build. That is the legacy I will leave. He reached down and took Seraphine's hand, pulling her up beside him. And I will not build it alone. Seraphine smiled, squeezing his fingers. She looked out at the crowd and added, "For those wondering, yes, he's actually kind of hot." Laughter rippled through the hall, breaking the solemnity with warmth. At the back of the room, Torvik stood in chains, awaiting judgment. Beside him, the surviving members of the Hollow Circle knelt with their heads bowed. Their fate would be decided by the new court. Justice, not vengeance. Near the front, a familiar figure caught Kylem's eye. Vespera Night Hollow, her silver hair shorn short in penance, wearing the simple gray robes of a servant. Calem had spared her life on one condition. She would spend the rest of her days serving the wolves she had once tormented. She had wept with gratitude when he pronounced the sentence instead of death. She didn't meet his gaze now. She didn't dare. The feast that followed lasted until dawn. Music and laughter filled the palace. Wolves who had been enemies danced together. Old grudges were set aside, not forgotten, but shelved in favor of a new beginning. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the eastern windows, Calem and Seraphine slipped away from the celebration. They found a quiet balcony overlooking the valley, the same view that had greeted the Aurelian kings for 2,000 years. "Happy?" Seraphine asked, leaning into him. "Terrified," Calem admitted. "I have no idea how to be a king." "Good. Kings who think they know everything are the dangerous ones." She looked up at him, her green eyes soft. "You'll learn. We'll learn together." He kissed her forehead, pulling her close. "I love you, Seraphine Varen." "I love you too, Calem Varen." She grinned. "My hot beta king." He laughed, a genuine sound he was still getting used to making. Below them, the realm stretched out in the golden light of morning. There would be challenges ahead, territories to unite, old wounds to heal, new enemies to face. But for the first time in 21 years, Caleb wasn't invisible. He was seen. He was loved. He was home. The ghost had become a god, and the entire court was kneeling. If you enjoyed this story and want more epic tales of revenge, romance, and redemption, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We drop fresh stories every single day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.